President Donald Trump threatened to bomb Oman today, a country the United States counts as an ally, as the Iran agreement expired and oil prices promptly moved. A United States senator says sailors on an American aircraft carrier cannot get basic needs met and describes one young sailor who has lost 20 to 25 pounds at sea. A federal appeals court just threw the Justice Department's handpicked prosecutor out of office in Nevada, in writing, in 36 pages. Also today, the Justice Department opened a new door for some people convicted of felonies to get their gun rights back. The Supreme Court has been asked to decide whether Texas can order the Ten Commandments into every public school. And an American citizen has flown back to the West Bank to physically stand inside his own home. 6 stories, all of them about money and power. Stay to the end, because the last one is the one almost nobody is covering. Start with the story that moved markets. CNN is running live updates on President Donald Trump threatening to bomb Oman, a country the United States counts as an ally, as an agreement with Iran expires. The Associated Press describes the same standoff from another angle. Trump threatening Oman while Oman works with Iran on a deal covering the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow shipping lane that carries a huge share of the world's seaborne oil. Read that again, because the target of the threat is not an adversary. It is a partner government acting as a go-between, and the threat lands at the exact moment the Iran agreement runs out of time. Now the money. On the same day, the Associated Press business desk reported United States stocks edging further from their record highs after oil prices rose. That is the transmission belt running from a threat in the Gulf straight to your gas pump, your airline ticket, and your retirement account. Energy traders price the risk to Hormuz long before a single shot is fired, and every extra cent at the pump is money out of an American household budget. Watch 3 things next: whether Oman and Iran close the Hormuz deal, whether the White House walks the threat back, and whether crude keeps climbing. Reported by CNN and the Associated Press. Now to the people the United States pays to fight. Democratic Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona is calling for an investigation into conditions aboard the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln. Kelly, a former Navy combat pilot who sits on the Senate Armed Services Committee, told NPR's Morning Edition that he spoke with the grandmother of a sailor serving on that ship during its extended deployment. She said her grandson was already thin when he joined the Navy, and that he now appears to have lost 20 to 25 pounds. In Kelly's words, the young man is struggling, it is depressing, and it is a very difficult situation. Kelly says sailors aboard the Lincoln cannot get basic needs met, and he criticized what he described as dismissive responses from President Donald Trump and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. The Associated Press reported Trump calling concerns about conditions on the Lincoln fake. Kelly says he and other lawmakers want a formal investigation and a bipartisan congressional delegation sent aboard to assess conditions firsthand. Why it hits your wallet. This is a taxpayer-funded force, and food, supply, and morale failures on a deployed carrier are readiness failures, the kind that push trained people out of uniform and push recruiting and retention costs up. Watch whether that delegation actually gets aboard. Reported by NPR. Here is one that changes who can legally hold a gun. The Associated Press reports the Justice Department has created a new pathway to restore gun rights for some people convicted of felonies. Under federal law, a felony conviction generally strips a person of the right to possess a firearm, and for a long stretch, the route back was effectively closed off. The Justice Department's new pathway, as the Associated Press describes it, reopens that route, not for everyone, but for some. That single word, some, is doing enormous work here, and the fine print is the entire story. Who qualifies, who makes the call, whether violent offenses are excluded, and whether a restored right actually shows up in the background check system that licensed dealers run before every sale. Why this reaches past politics. Felony record is one of the hardest barriers to employment and to ordinary life after a sentence is served. So any federal decision that quietly redraws that line touches an enormous number of records. It also lands on gun dealers, who are the ones legally exposed if a sale goes to a prohibited buyer. Expect legal challenges, expect state officials to insist their own laws still apply, and expect this review process to be fought over line by line. Reported by the Associated Press. A federal appeals court just told the Justice Department it cannot install its own prosecutor and skip the Senate. On Monday, a three-judge panel of the Ninth United States Circuit Court of Appeals upheld an order disqualifying Sigal Chattah from the top federal prosecutorial job in Nevada. In a 36-page opinion, the panel ruled that the Justice Department's effort to sidestep Senate confirmation is unlawful, and that Chattah cannot continue in the role. That is the Hill's reporting. Strip out the legal vocabulary, and the fight is simple. A United States attorney is supposed to go through Senate confirmation. The Justice Department used a workaround to keep its chosen prosecutor in that chair without the vote, and the appeals court has now said in writing that the workaround does not hold. The practical stakes are large because every federal case in Nevada runs through that office. A United States attorney signs off on indictments, plea agreements, asset forfeitures, and corporate settlements, decisions that move serious money and take away people's liberty. When the legality of the person holding that office is in doubt, defense lawyers across an entire district gain a brand new argument. Watch whether the Justice Department seeks further review, and whether cases handled during Chattah's tenure now get challenged. Reported by The Hill. The Ten Commandments are heading toward the Supreme Court. The Associated Press reports the justices have been asked to review a Texas law requiring the Ten Commandments to be displayed in public schools. That request drops one of the sharpest church and state questions in American law back in front of a court that has already reshaped this territory in recent years. It also arrives during a loud stretch for the justices. The Associated Press separately reported that the Supreme Court again rebuffed President Donald Trump's push to toss out the $5 million verdict in the E. Jean Carroll case. Here is the part nobody prints on a poster. Mandates like this cost real money. School districts are the ones that have to fund and post the displays, and school districts are the ones that get sued over them, which means local taxpayers end up financing both sides of the argument through legal fees and settlements. If your district sits in Texas, that is your school budget on the line, not an abstraction. What happens next is procedural, but decisive. The justices decide whether to take the case. A refusal leaves the lower court rulings in place. Acceptance turns one Texas classroom rule into a national precedent every other state can copy. Reported by the Associated Press. Last story, and it is the most personal one on this list. The Associated Press reports that a Palestinian American has returned to the West Bank to defend his home, which is under siege by Israeli settlers. Sit with what that sentence actually means. An American citizen has flown back into one of the most contested places on Earth, not for a visit, but because he believes that if he is not physically inside the house, he loses it. In the West Bank, property is not settled in a filing cabinet. It is settled by who is standing on the ground and by who is willing to keep standing there. And when the person standing there carries a United States passport, it stops being only a local dispute and becomes a question for Washington as well. What protection, if any, the American government offers its own citizens whose homes abroad are taken, damaged, or occupied? For any American holding property overseas, the uncomfortable lesson is that a passport is not a deed, and a deed is not a defense. Watch whether United States officials say anything at all about this case, because silence is itself a policy, and it sets the expectation for every American family in the same position. Reported by the Associated Press. Two things to watch tomorrow: whether Oman and Iran actually close that Strait of Hormuz deal while the bombing threat is still on the table, and whether Congress gets a bipartisan delegation aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln. Here's my question for you. If one sailor's grandmother had never called a senator, would any of us know what is happening on that ship? Tell me in the comments. If this was worth your time, hit like, subscribe to the Capitol Oversight, and turn on the bell.